Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Salute to Service Month. My name is Mark Elliott, and I have the privilege of serving as the Global Head of Military and Veteran Affairs here at JPMorgan Chase. And as we kick off Salute to Service Month, it's a personal honor to speak to an audience of people both here in the room and those joining us by Zoom who care so deeply about our country's service members, our history, and our responsibility for future generations. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge members of our External Advisory Council. We're joined by Michelle Brito and her recently retired husband, General Gary Brito. I have to get that in there, Gary. Lieutenant Colonel retired Matt Lewis, Matt Flavin, and Mrs. Charlene Austin, who I'm so glad you were able to make it as well. So thank you all. They actually represent some advisors to us here in the firm to help us, promote and sponsor programs like this. And so we're totally indebted to them for all of the great work that they do in helping us shape this work. Here at JPMorgan Chase, our Office of Military and Veteran Affairs is focused on supporting those who served, those who continue to serve, and the families that serve alongside them. Our goals are straightforward: supporting and hiring those veterans, supporting and hiring our military spouses, and supporting our caregivers, helping our families thrive, but also strengthening partnerships with organizations with those similar goals. Today's gathering is a powerful example of that partnership and purpose. This Scholar Service, our series conversation, is a program of the American Battle Monuments Foundation. The ABMF is the philanthropic partner of the American Battle Monuments Commission, a federal agency responsible for all 26 of American military cemeteries and 31 monuments overseas. Many of us are familiar with the cemetery at Normandy. It's one of the most solemn and sacred resting places in the world, but it's just one of many sacred grounds where our nation's heroes rest. While the ABMC maintains these cemeteries and monuments with extraordinary care, they also, through education and outreach, ensure the next generation of Americans never forget. JPMorgan Chase is proud of our partnership with ABMF. Their work reminds us that what we are, what we value, and the responsibility each of us carries to remember and honor those who came before us. Today, we are fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from leaders who embody that mission. The conversation brings together two extraordinary military leaders, thinkers, practitioners who shaped our nation's understanding of strategy, leadership, and service. Retired U.S. Army General Stanley McChrystal, who was also a member of our advisory council once back in the day, and retired U.S. Army Major General John Boyd, who we both found out we served in Germany together back in the 80s. To help us begin this conversation, it is my privilege to actually introduce someone who's devoted his life to defending our country and leading our armed forces at the highest level. General Mark Milley, the 20th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the 39th Chief of Staff of the Army, and a senior advisor to JPMorgan Chase, but more importantly, my friend. So General Milley.
So let me just take a couple of minutes before I introduce Stan and John here for a second. First, I want to applaud Mark, your effort, Mark Elliott's effort. And I know we're broadcasting to the rest of the firm. This firm is about 300,000-ish or so strong. Amongst this firm are about 20 to 30,000 veterans. So I didn't go to West Point, and I'm not a banker, so I actually don't do math very well, but I stayed at a Motel 6 last night, and that would tell me that that's about 10%. So think about that. A firm as powerful and big and as much throw weight in the financial industry as JPMorgan has taken the time, the interest to hire a vet, right? And with that vet comes extraordinary knowledge, skills, attributes, and most of all, character and integrity, which we're going to hear from for a minute. So Mark, you've done extraordinary work here, and I want to thank you personally. I'd like to give a round of applause for Mark. And Charlene and Michelle and your +1, Gary. Thank you. Sorry, Gary. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that, what you guys are doing as well. Good friends, many of you I've known over the years. Merrick there you are, Mick. Thanks for being here as well. Some great folks. I've had the privilege of serving 4.5 decades, and my family has served in uniform for this country over 120 years. I've got a great uncle, my father's uncle, who was wounded at the Meuse-Argonne, 1918, and he survived the war and after World War I. But in just a few days, in 6 days now, we're going to have the 11th of November, and that at 11 o'clock in the morning is the war to end all wars. And of course, all wars didn't end, but that war ended, and we celebrate not just Armistice Day, which is really important. We also celebrate it as Veterans Day. And in this country's history, in the United States history, roughly 3 million Americans from the time of the Revolution to today have shed their blood to maintain this Constitution of ours, this country of ours, this experiment in e pluribus unum, and from the many come one. About 3 million, about 1.5 million killed, and about another 1.5 million wounded. And there's probably several 100,000 missing that we can't really truly account for in all of the wars. And we probably undershot the wounded by at least another 1.5 million. So you could actually do the math, and you're probably looking at somewhere around 4 million plus who've actually shed blood for this country. And there's probably another several million who suffered from the invisible wounds of war. That's a lot of people who have given their lives, sacrificed enormously. And many of you did that yourselves in various combat zones. So my salute to my family. My dad hit the beach at Iwo Jima and Kwajalein and Saipan and Tinian. My mother took care of the wounded. Another great uncle was wounded at Gallipoli, not in the American Army, but in the Canadian Army, which was a subset of the British Army at the time. Cousins in Vietnam, uncles in the Korean War, and then myself and others, relatives to include nephews, have been in uniform, at least since 1980 sort of thing. And amongst you are many veterans. So my hat is off to you, each of you, and I want to thank you for your service and thank all of those out in the audience, the extended audience at JP Morgan, for your service. Today, we're going to hear from two great Americans. John Boyd, Major General, retired, and perhaps his greatest accomplishment is actually being a card-carrying member of the Red Sox Nation, so I thank you for that. He is a native of Vermont, a graduate of Norwich University, and he spent 36 years in the uniform of this country, 2 tours in Afghanistan, multiple tours elsewhere, many tours in NATO, spent some time in Kosovo. John, thank you. Highly qualified, highly accomplished officer in many theaters, and has done just a tremendous job. And he continues to serve this nation as part of the American Battlefields Monuments Commission, which you heard is a great testimony to our service and sacrifice. I had an opportunity just about 3 or 4 weeks ago to go to the Philippines with JP Morgan, and part of that trip, we went to the Battlefield Monuments Commission, American Cemetery in Manila, which is amazing. I had not been there. I have an uncle, my mother's brother, who fought in the Battle of Manila. He was with the 1st Cavalry Division at the time. He too survived the war. Later became a cop in the Boston area, but he fought there, and to go to that was incredibly humbling. I'd been to Normandy, I've been to the Meuse-Argonne, been to Bellawood, been to many other places that you guys have taken care of. I've been to the ones in North Africa, but had not been to the one in Manila. So thank you for what you guys are doing, not only for your 36 years of great service, but everything that the Battlefield Monuments Commission does. It's a tremendous tribute to our fallen, and we can't thank you enough for that. And John, what John's going to do today is moderate and have a discussion with Stan McChrystal. And Stan really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. So, he graduated in 1976 out of West Point, and I say graduated, he barely graduated. West Point's a public university. I don't know if you know that, but public university, and the internet's a very powerful thing. So I went on the internet and I checked out his military record, and it's quite extensive, quite distinguished post-graduation. But those 4 years at West Point, those are kind of sketchy. And he doesn't hold the record, but he comes very close to holding the record of hours on the area. And his grade point, this is a smart guy. This is a legitimately smart guy. Stan McChrystal's way smart. He just didn't demonstrate it at West Point. He matured a little later. So, but he graduates West Point, And then he served in some of our most elite units, served in, led, and commanded 82nd Airborne Division, Special Forces, and of course, famous for the Ranger Regiment. Commands a company in the Ranger Regiment, commands a battalion in the Ranger Regiment, and then commands the Ranger Regiment itself. And then after that, he makes general, and he commands all of our most elite Special Operations Forces in JSOC. And then he goes on, of course, in his final command position to command ISAF, which had about, at the time, I think about 140, 150,000 troops from 45 different countries, and did a spectacular job in my view. I would tell you that we are going to hear, in my personal view, one of the top 1 or 2, maybe 3 at the most, finest officers, certainly in my generation, and I would argue since the end of World War II, since 1945. Stan McChrystal is incredible. He's an incredible tactician. He's an incredible operator. He's an incredible strategist. He's a wonderful officer. He is a mentor. He's a friend. But most of all, he's an example. He's an example of living a life of character. And you get the book right outside. You can flip through it. And that's only a sampling of his life. This is a man who has enormous integrity. He has conviction. He understands the cause for which he served. And he's deeply, deeply committed to that. And he served for 35, 36 years as well. But he's never stopped serving. He has always been a selfless servant for others. Stan McChrystal is as good as it gets for anyone who has ever worn the uniform. So it's my pleasure, my privilege, my real humble honor, actually, to introduce both John Boyd and Stan McChrystal. Thank you.
I don't have a good side, so it doesn't matter. So
I have always said I had a face for radio.
There you
sir,
go.
So, well, if I could start just to say thank you for the opportunity to come here with you, sir, today to discuss your book on character. And as a shameless plug for the book, I would say there aren't many books that I've read in 1 or 2 sittings recently. This is one of them. And I found myself being able to immediately connect with what you had to say and putting those pages behind me and really sitting there at the end wondering, well, that's it? I mean, I'm done. I got it. Okay, time for me to go back to work. But I appreciated the book.
kind.
General Milley, thank you for those powerful introductions and for setting the stage for the discussion this afternoon. And as I said, General McChrystal, it is my absolute honor to have you with us here in the Salute the Service event for JPMorgan Chase. Thank you again. So this afternoon, we move from your distinguished record of command and service, which General Milley has illuminated so well, to the foundational topic that drives all great leadership, which is character. And we're here to discuss your latest and perhaps most personal book on character, Choices That Define a Life. In the book, you argue that character is not a static trait and that we are born with, but instead you present it as moral muscle that is forged and strengthened through constant succession of choices, many of them mundane, some of them momentous, but in a world that's often very loud, very fast, very complex. And this conversation is in the quiet about character. And then again, the deliberate work of what it takes to build character could not be more relevant in this day and age today. And so with that, sir, if I could, you've written extensively on leadership, strategy, and risk. And the question that struck me first and struck many is why now? Why at this point in your life and career? Did you decide to write this? Why did you feel compelled on this really very singular topic?
Well, thanks so much for doing this today, and thanks for having me. And thanks, Mark, for the overly generous comments. And it's great to see old friends here. Emphasis on old because some of us are getting there, but also some incredibly accomplished people. So I'm humbled by the fact that I'm in the room with people, many cases that I've admired and served with for a long time. My relationship with JPMorgan also began in early 2011 when Frank Bisignano came up to Yale where I was teaching and said that JPMorgan had decided that they were not treating veterans correctly. It was on mortgages. And they decided to form a committee board to look into this, and would I be the first member of that board? And I asked them, are you serious, or is this just a gesture? And they said, no, Jamie is dead serious. I was on it for like 8 years, and I will tell you, that's all I ever saw. Absolute commitment. And I think JP Morgan actually pulled a tremendous number of other firms, in some cases shamed them, into doing things for veterans that needed to be done. It was really about, at first, the hiring veterans. And so I'm deeply appreciative for what JP Morgan's done and the continued focus. So why did I write this book? I had written 4 books before. I started when I came out of the military, and people said, okay, you need to write your memoirs. And I said, no, I don't, not writing anything. Leave me alone. And they said, you have a debt to history. I said, I don't have a debt to anybody. And they said, we'll pay you money. I said, okay, let's write this book. So we wrote that book. And then the publisher came to me and he goes, wow, that worked pretty well, I think, and so we wrote second book. And then gotten books that were just interesting. In each case, I worked with at least one young person as a partner, a co-author. And it was just tremendous experience. That was fun. Then I was through after 4. And then I would sit in our living room in Alexandria, Virginia, where some of you have been. And Annie and I like to read at night. We just sit there and read. And about every 20 minutes, one of us would interrupt the other. And I would give her my great ideas on various things around the world. And she'd kind of smile and, and then we go back to reading. And then finally I did it. And she said, stop telling me this, write them down. So I started writing them in these 800 to 1,000 word essays or reflections. And I gave a pile of them to her and she goes, this is a book. And the original title was going to be What I Think About the Things I Think About, which I thought was clever and would, sell a ton. She didn't like it. Publisher didn't like it. And then we looked at it and we realized that almost all of the reflections at this point in my life intersected on character. And they intersected on character probably for the same reason most of us are having the same thought right now. Character was always the most important thing. We just didn't always think about it that way. My parents were these wonderful examples. My father was a soldier. My mother was a Southern girl who married a soldier, and she was a wonderful person. I never saw them do anything wrong in my life. Not even take a parking place they shouldn't have. I never saw them fight. They never sat us down, there were 6 kids, and talked to us about character. They just were this example. And then I went to West Point, where they were not at all subtle about trying to teach you character, paintings and statues all around, to try to get you to find people that you want to emulate. And none of them are perfect, but it gives you a good setting for this. And then we go off on our careers and we are reminded about character, but we're distracted by what we're doing. We're learning how to work machine guns and mortars and all the things we do. And character bumps into it. I think all of us would have those instances where suddenly something happened and it doesn't test your competence, it tests your character. But then you keep moving on. And then as you get later in life and you get more senior, suddenly it starts to be mostly about character. Because now you're not the most competent person in your organization. You may be the oldest, but everybody else actually knows more about what you're doing than you do. And so what you're there to do is provide a beacon through your behavior, through the overt part of your character, and through the tough decisions that you make. And so it got to the point where I started to realize that was always the most important thing, and I just had not thought deeply enough about it. So I went back and I started reading philosophy, the stuff you'd been assigned when you were younger, but you had only read part of it. I started reading that. I started thinking about it. I'm not a philosopher. I'm just a person still on a journey. And I don't think I have the answers to anything in that book. But I think I have identified some questions worth us all considering from your own personal perspective. And that was sort of the idea of it.
Well, that's great. And I really, when I read the part about the philosophers, I had much the same thoughts. As I walked past them, I've had to read them on purpose, but I've not gone back on my own to do it. And so I've taken that challenge. But, you talk about the two key components of character, and those being convictions and discipline. Could you elaborate on that to
Sure.
us and tell us how that affects our conviction, our character?
Yeah. Like everybody in my class at West Point, I was trained as an engineer. You know, I didn't have a choice. And so everything at the end comes out into an equation. So I came to think about character as an equation, and I kept it simple. I think character is the product of two things. It's the product of your convictions times the discipline you have to live to them. Convictions are your deeply held beliefs. They're not the little things that you just accept because somebody on TV says it. You kind of go, okay. No, they're the things you've pressure tested that you are willing to live to or die for. But the other part is your discipline, because a lot of people say they have great character. They may even believe they have great character. But in the moments when it's tested, that's not what happens in their behavior. Because ultimately, character is reflected in what you do, not what you say, not what you write, not any of that. It's reflected in what you do. Tom Paine said that reputation is what men think of us. Character is what gods and angels know of us. And I think it captures there the essence of who we are. And so ultimately, I think the idea that our character is our identity, and that's our most precious possession, but it's also our biggest responsibility.
As I looked at character, and I was trying, I'm an analogy person, and I really was saying, put this into perspective for me, and so my head worked with it. And what came back as I searched the internet and searched my mind, the internet helped me with the sculptor and the stone, and that the stone is what is possible for our character, and the discipline is the hammer and chisel that we choose to use to get to it. And so I found that to be something that I could.
Where were you when I was writing the book? I think that's perfect, because we think about that because you're chiseling away at your character your whole life to the day you die. And if you are effective at it, you make progress. And then there are certain events or moments, some of which are really difficult, that are actually the most formative. Not trying to dredge up painful memories, but Charlene, you and Annie, Lloyd and I experienced the Pope crash, 1994, March 1994. 2 battalions were down preparing for a parachute jump, an aircraft, freak accident, air traffic control problem. An F-16 and a C-130 collided. The C-130 was damaged, but was able to land. The F-16 pilot ejects. The plane goes down to the airfield and hits a parked C-141 waiting to take paratroopers for a parachute jump. Daylight jump, nice day, a Tuesday. We're at peace. You know, it's just kind of a good deal. And suddenly this wall of flame goes from this airplane over to an area called Green Ramp, where the paratroopers are doing final preparations for the jump. It literally, like a tsunami, it covers people. For my battalion, it killed 21 and it grievously wounded about 45. And when I say grievously wounded, mostly burns. And young people who are horrifically burned over most of their body. And the responses by the units and by our commander that we were lucky enough to have, General Steele at the time as a division, was remarkably good. It focused on take care of your paratroopers that are living, take care of the families that are dealing with this, many of which were like 18-year-old wives with a baby. And their husband's been a paratrooper for 6 months, and now he's either horribly injured or he's passed. And that was complicated enough. And then there's the medical aspect to it. And then there's taking care of those who died, honoring them, going around the country and burying them. And when you have an opportunity for someone to remind you what the right priorities are, what matters most, and what you have to tend to first, I think you start to see character emerge. And even in yourself, if you're lucky enough to have good examples and people around you that are doing things well, it shapes you too. Think about what happens in combat. First time a round goes off, the privates look at the sergeant. They've already been taught what to do. They know what to do, but they look at the sergeant and they say, okay, what are we doing? And if the sergeant takes certain action and acts calm, that's what they do. We all sort of look one level up. And so I think character's a lot about that. I think character's not just a single thing. I think our characters in the military were better when we were around good people. And for the most part, that was my experience. For the most part, you could look at your peers and know what they told you was true. There were always some exceptions, and they became sort of known across the community and not honored. But for the most part, if someone says something, you just believe them. If they're going to try to do something, you know they're going to do their best. And so it makes everybody stand a little taller, act a little better, because that's the expectation, that's the norm. And so I think character, it's not theater. It's not acting out something you're not, but it's acting out something you want to be and that you might not be without a little help from the right partner, the right people around you, the right values of the organization.
And so you talk about morality a little bit, or morals in general. Yeah. How do those morals impact character?
Yeah.
Because in theory, the premise has been made, you can show character without moral strength or moral conviction.
Yeah, and I've struggled with this, and I don't know the right answer. I'll give you a sort of where it's taken me. I'm not very religious. I was raised an Episcopalian. We went to church all the time. My brother's an Army chaplain. He's very devout. For some reason, I've just had, I believe, but I've not been comfortable as much with organized religion. Morality is sort of the same. I have a set of morals that I believe in, and that I failed on occasions. I haven't lived up to them, but they're not tightly corseted. They're not a set of things that are so strict that I'm willing to judge everybody else on everything they do, because in fact, their perspective can be different than mine. But having said that, I do think there are limits within that. I'd like to be part of a society where you have enough breathing space in there for people to be themselves, people to explore, people to make mistakes, people to be redeemed. But there also have to be boundaries in all things about morals that we say, well, that's just not right. We don't treat people like that. We don't do certain things, or we do certain things. And I'd like to have a society where we debate those, for sure, but we have some things where when somebody's outside of it, you just go, well, that's unacceptable. Because at some point we have to have standards. Most of us who have military experience know that an organization without enforced standards is a joke. But the reality is, if you have expectations of how you conduct yourself, I think it makes each of us perform better.
And so in those organizations, leadership is critical to character. And so really this idea of indispensability of character in a leader, from your experience, how does the character of that leader impact the team or organization and subsequently serve as that example?
Yeah, it's, I think we learn this through experience, because we've all been around people in whatever we do who are very good at what they do. They're very talented. They're great salespeople. They're great bankers. They're great soldiers, but there's something there that is incomplete, and you just feel it. It's the leader who has a salesperson who's the best salesperson on the team, but they're just a toxic leader, or they're a sleazy person. Then you hit that thing, well, wow, I don't want to, this is my superstar. But the reality is we make those decisions. What is the impact of that personality on everyone else? If we're lucky, we go through a career where we have leaders who are competent above us, but we also trust their character. We have just faith in it. Almost everybody at some point in your career has a leader that may or may not be competent, but you're just not sure where they're going to come down in a critical moment. Loyalty to you, loyalty to others. We used to use the term, a friend of mine, Greg Vogel, a CIA officer, and I became very close, still are. And we referred to it as, will they come for you if you need them to? That means you've been put somewhere in a difficult situation and they sent you. But then when it gets really ugly, will they come? It might be a meeting in the Pentagon where they got to rescue you. It might be a valley in Afghanistan. It might be a piece of desert in Iraq or anywhere else around the world. And those are the kinds of faith in the character of the people. And I'm also going to expand that, if you don't mind, to organizational character. Because I think organizations have character as well, and it's enforced by the people in it. I used to remind people, and it came from the old movie, From Here to Eternity, don't get confused when Private Robert E. Lee Pruitt says, just because I love the Army doesn't mean the Army loves me. The Army can't love you. It's an inanimate object. And ultimately, the last interaction of everybody with their service is rejection, when they tell you to go away. Mm-hmm. And when I was a young captain, Norman Schwarzkopf was my division commander. He got in front of everybody in the division, got us in a theater, and said, "You're all going to get passed over for promotion." And I'm thinking, shit, I'm only a captain. And then he goes, "I know, you're looking up here thinking that guy with stars, what's he complaining about?" He says, "You're going to get passed over. It may be from first lieutenant to captain, or it may be from 3-star to 4-star. It may be from 4-star to some job you wanted, but you're going to get rejected at some point." He says, "Get over it right now." That was an interesting thing that I've never forgotten, because it gets back to organizational character. How do you feel about the organization? What do you want from it? And what do we mean by character? I tell a story in the book about a colonel who was selected for brigadier general, and wonderful officer, one of the best people I ever served with. And there was a disagreement, really a staffer had a disagreement and held up his confirmation to brigadier general, and it went on about a year. So much so that he kept getting calls, like on a Friday night, he'd get a call from Pentagon saying, "Okay, we cleaned it up. You're going to get confirmed on Monday." And then it wouldn't happen. And he and his wife went through this horrible roller coaster. It was painful to watch. And then finally they just said, "Okay, enough." And he retired. And he never once complained about it. He never once felt he was treated unfairly, although he was treated horribly unfairly. And then you say, well, who treated him unfairly? Was it the staffer? I don't know. I don't even know who the staffer was, because he had opinion, may have felt strongly about it. And then the Army, did the Army treat him unfairly because it didn't stand up for him, didn't go to the mat for him? And then you say, well, senior Army leaders were in a position where they have to protect the institution. They have to maintain the support of political leaders. So they're in this damnably complicated situation. And suddenly you cut away one of your own. And it's one of the most painful things you see or you're ever a part of in your career. And so I think character of an organization is something that is built, but it's never simple. You can write I use the Army because it's my experience. You can write a list of Army values, but they are going to be tested in ways you just don't think about.
And so today, as we talked, we're here for the salute to service. There's, as General Milley said, nearly 10% of JP Morgan, Chase is a veteran. And so many of them are familiar with that environment, the unique military environment of service, those explicit codes of conduct, values, the high stakes environment, and so forth. And really that relentless demand for selfless action. But would you, for those who are in the audience today and who are here at JP Morgan Chase, would you talk about how does acts of civilian service, such as volunteering, mentoring, leading a community project, provide an opportunity to build that moral muscle you described on character?
Yeah. First off, to all veterans, and I think we know it, we're not all heroes. We did what the nation asked us to do and what we should have done. Kind of simple as that. But you don't have to be a hero to be a really good citizen, to be a really good person. And that's really kind of the goal I think most of us are trying to reach to. And the thing about that, you do it when you get in the service, you do it because you raise your right hand, you say you do it because your comrades to your left and right, you want their respect. You want to feel like you're doing your part. And then you leave the service. Well, your responsibility doesn't stop. The reality is the responsibility of a citizen, if we think about it, often isn't talked about enough. We think of citizenship as a right. Most of the people in this room got citizenship by accident of birth. We didn't do anything for it. We just got born. Boom. And we won the lottery. We're Americans. And for a lot of Americans, if you vote and pay your taxes, you've checked the blocks. We vote at a lower rate than they do in Afghanistan, which should concern us. But the reality is, I think our commitment, our responsibilities, inalienable responsibilities, are as important as our rights, maybe more. And what they really mean is, I've got to be a part of the whole, because the United States was not formed by the Almighty. He didn't come down and say, this is the United States of America. 13 colonies got together and they made a deal, we'll be better together than separate. And then that thing has grown, and all it is it's a covenant. It's an agreement. And it says, to get the benefits of unity, we will make certain commitments to the whole, both on a state level and on an individual level. And so those commitments are pretty interesting, because the first commitment is to take care of each other. And not every American can take care of themselves equally. Just like when there are times in my life I've been unable to take care of myself at all, and other people step in. But when I am able, I should be stepping in. And so what I have been a part of since I left the service was the national service movement, which is civilian national service. And what we were fighting for, still are, is a year of paid national service for every young American. With the idea, not that what the young person does during that year in conservation, healthcare, education, whatever, is going to necessarily change the world, but it's going to change them. It's going to grow something inside them that increases their sense of ownership for the country, their sense of responsibility. You know, now that I've been in civilian business for 15 years, you always tell people in the company, treat this company like you own it, because you want them to take that level of responsibility and pride in it. And that's the way we need to think about our country. Think about, treat this country like we own it. I wrote a piece in the book, if you get a chance to read it, about a trip I took over not long after October 7th to Israel. And I went down to Kibbutz Be'eri. I went to the music festival location. It was horrific. Far worse than anything that I had imagined from afar. And it was still soon enough after it where it was incredibly raw. And the Israeli military officers and intelligence professionals that I'd known for years before from previous work, got a chance to get with them, and you could feel what was there. But the most interesting part was, we met the Barak Brigade when it came out of their first month and a half in Gaza. So they'd gone in and they'd started military operations. And this has nothing to do whether those are right or wrong. There was this group of young people, a battalion equivalent that we spent time with, came out in their armored vehicles, parked their armored vehicles. And anyone who's been in a mech unit knows You come out of a tough thing like that, you park the armored vehicles next to you, you drop the ramp, and you look like the dog's breakfast. I mean, all kind of stuff rolls out and stuff like that, and the armored vehicles are shot up. And the young people that came out, and they all looked about 15, were different than the people who went into Gaza. It was funny, as they walked around and interacted with each other, they were trying to act like they think combat veterans are supposed to act. Because nobody teaches you. How are you supposed to act? Nonchalant or connected to your friends? But the big transformation that I think occurred for them is they had lived in the shadow of the heroes of all the wars of Israel in modern history from 1948 on. And you talk about, Mark mentioned his father in the Pacific. When you're the son of someone like that, you're proud of them, but you also feel kind of funny because you haven't done that. Now you've got this group of people that come out of a really difficult thing, and they have earned part ownership in their nation. They have done something for it, so they don't have to be embarrassed about what the nation does for them. That's what I think national service could be to young Americans. Doesn't mean they all have to go to war. We don't want them to. But we'd love to have them go work in schools in New Orleans. We'd love to work on conservation. We'd love to do all the stuff that needs to be done and do it with other young Americans from a different zip code who don't have their economic background, maybe don't have their education, maybe don't have any of the other things that typically segment us as a society. Because once you serve with a bunch of people like that, you do have a different opinion. You suddenly realize when it comes down to getting stuff done, everybody's a lot more equal. And of course, that's, John, that was our experience in the military. And such a small percentage of young Americans will ever have the military experience. We don't need that many, plus so many aren't qualified, but they could all have the experience of serving the country. What if when you were at the gate to board your aircraft, and you know how they say, okay, active military, come up and board first. What if they say, everybody, every young American do a national service this year, board first? That's probably, for a lot of those people, that would be the only time in their lives they got called out and told you're special, board first. Could make quite an impact.
That idea of national service for the youth, in some discussions I had a while on a NATO assignment with my French counterparts, they were struggling with the issue in France of social unrest.
Yeah.
And the one thing that they came back to in their mind was they had stopped conscription, mandatory service, and that they were looking for ways to bring those people back in because they found they had ended up in silos and they didn't talk anymore. So I think that's fascinating topic, sir. And I believe I followed the Franklin Project for a while, and I am a believer. I think that's a way for people to go forward, having relatives who had been in the CCCs, who moved all over the country in order to make money for their family, but they were exposed to people from every corner of the earth, from little places like rural Arkansas.
What was your first platoon in the Army like? Describe them demographically, and what were they like personality-wise?
So my first platoon was in Germany. It was a special weapons platoon working with the German Air Force. So an Army guy working with the German Air Force was already a strange mix. All very bright young people because they had to get a clearance, but they came from every walk of life. And they were a fascinating group of people, folks that were incredibly smart, who had come from the inner city, from a Vermont kid. I knew Vermont. I went to school in Vermont. But then to see kids from all over the country, and honestly, they were kids my age. They were 23, 22. I was 23 years old. And they just happened to have enlisted, and I happened to go the other route to get to where I was. And I was always fascinated by how their ideas, their thoughts about our country, their thoughts about service. That doesn't mean they were all perfect. It wasn't Pollyanna. We had some that weren't, but many of them were there for all the right reasons. And they were there to better themselves as individuals, both in the service and to get the opportunity, the benefits once they left. And so I found that as really formative and what really started my true love with the Army.
And what teaches you? It teaches you about our society. And a lot of people don't ever get that experience. They never get put together with a group of people who aren't from where they are.
So I could ask questions all day, sir, but that's, I would get in trouble. And number two, we have plenty of folks here, both in the room, I'm sure, as well as those online who would love to ask you questions. And so all I would ask is just if we can accommodate the maximum number of people that can ask questions in this time allotted, about 20 minutes. I would just kindly ask you keep your questions as focused and succinct as possible. So basically, sharp question rather than a lengthy preamble would allow us to get to more questions. And with that, sir.
You're also talking to me. You're telling me to keep shorter answers.
Never, sir.
I got it.
Do it.
I got it.
So we'll turn it over for questions.
Sir, could you talk about the intersection between character and accountability?
Yeah. The intersection between character and accountability, it's the eye of the beholder, but the way I think of it is we have accountability for what we do. And if we're in a formal position, we have formal accountability for what we do. And often that's written in great detail. And so this is what we're going to be measured on. These are our metrics. These are our, outcomes that we're supposed to have. I think character is wider than that. I think that obviously a person who has character accepts accountability, accepts the idea, accepts the responsibility of accountability, doesn't try to dole it out, because you can pass decision authority to people junior, but you're still responsible for the outcome. And you shouldn't try to say, well, I let my people do it and they screwed it up. You still own it. And that's, it's just something we come. And I think character is the character, as I think of it, manifests itself in the way that you're willing to accept the outcome of things that you are accountable for, whether you did it or not. There will be a bunch of points in your life where you will be held accountable for something that you didn't do. But the other side of the coin, I say, in my life, I have a couple of those, but I've got a lot of cases where I get credit for stuff I didn't do either. And I haven't argued about those. So I think that's sort of way, and you got to come to peace with that, because sometimes it can be painful to accept that. Thanks.
Don't be shy. Just raise your hand. We'll pass you the microphone.
Hey, Stan again, thanks. And you didn't put me up to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You touched on briefly on organizational character. Yeah. If you can expand, not using JP Morgan Chase or others, but from your observations, not only when McChrystal Group, et cetera, but others from the defense industrial base. I mean, there's a lot of teammates in here that come from business and industries. Yeah. From your observations of those organizational character, if you could expand on that a little bit. Thanks.
Just so you guys know, Mick and I served together in the Rangers for a long time, and I admire him as much as anyone I can think of. So I'm going to fall back first to that organizational character. You're all in different units. One of the ones that impacted me was the Rangers, and they have a Ranger creed. And a lot of organizations have statements of values or a creed. The Rangers have a 6-stanza one they came up with. And the modern day Rangers were formed right in the wake of Vietnam, and the Army was struggling. And so they tried to create units where the standards would be really good. So they were really specific about it. And this Ranger creed is not just, it's not a poem. It's not a mindless mantra that everybody recites every day. It's a promise that every Ranger makes to every other Ranger. And there's a line in there that says, I'll never leave a falling comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And you say, okay. And then you go, whoa, wait a minute. What does that really mean? That means if Mick is out in the street and there's shooting going on out there, even if he's already dead, I'm going to go get him. I've already decided. We decided that when I decided to be in this organization, or when I make that promise every day. And so you go, wow, that's more powerful than the wedding vows. But on the other hand, you got 2,000, when I was in it, 2,000 other Rangers who made that promise to you. And suddenly you go, well, then there's a lot of strength to it. It gave the organization a character by setting a set of examples. They tried to write it in words so that young people coming from all over could see those and they could grab onto them and they could go, okay, I buy that. Some of the best leaders I ever worked with, the clearest minded leaders, were senior NCOs in the Army who had come from lousy backgrounds. I mean, broken homes, things like that. And yet they were offered the values of the Army or the unit they were in, and they looked at it and they go, okay, I accept that. And they literally embraced them. Sometimes officers, officers see things in shades of gray. Sometimes they're not in shades of gray. I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting where something's going, we're trying to make a decision about X, and you're going, well, and the sergeant major goes, what are you doing? This is simple. That's wrong. This is right. And you go, you're right. Got it. Because organizational character can do that. And so if you think about the best firms that you deal with, and I deal with a lot of them now, so I get to see a waterfront of them, they have this set of values that are often written down, but they're more reflected in the culture. We don't treat our clients, we take care of them first. That's what we do. And there's not a discussion about it. It doesn't say we'll make more money if we do this. No, we've decided long ago that's what we do. We don't do certain things. We do certain things. How do we take care of each other? And so those things of organizational character become sacred. And when they erode or when they are assaulted, to me, they're the things worth fighting and dying for. Because if they are worthy elements for an organization or even a nation, they're hard to get back.
General McChrystal, you said that the development of character is a continual thing throughout your life. Is there something recent that you could think of that shaped your character? Obviously, I imagine you had lots of opportunities throughout your illustrious career, but something more recent that occurred that developed that for you.
My career wasn't that illustrious. Well, I'll talk about, obviously, the personal one that some of the people in this room were very familiar. My career ended suddenly in 2010. And I was commanding in Afghanistan, and I was a 4-star general, and things were going, personally about as well as it could be. I'd been married for 34 years. I was happy. All of those things lined up. And then through an article that was written that basically painted my command team as being juvenile and whatnot. And some of that's true. I didn't think it was fair, but there's always truth in everything. My career ended suddenly, and it didn't just end. It ended on Fox News and CNN and everything else on the ticker. Disgraced general. And I had an 86-year-old father still living. I had a son in college, and they're seeing it too. And it's one thing for me to see it. It's another for them. And then I had a little girl that I'd married 34 years ago who had hitched her wagon to mine when she was very young. And now suddenly everything she had done was gone too. And so when I think about that, I go, well, how much worse could it get? Well, the answer is they didn't kill me. I didn't come back from Iraq or Afghanistan badly wounded. So I got nothing to whine about. I've still got a lot of friends. I didn't know that at first. It took a little while to be reminded that I had this network of people who cared. And I still had me. I still had my values if I held on to them. And so that's the moment you get to choose. We're all going to have something like that. And you get to choose. And the way I word it now, because Mark didn't mention it, but I have an unofficial role with the U.S. military. When somebody gets in trouble like that, they send them to me. And it's a strange sort of a thing. I guess it's an honor, maybe. And they go, you really had this car crash, and yet you're still moving forward. And I basically, that's what I tell them. I said, everything behind you, you can't litigate. It's done. And nobody cares. You think that everybody you ever talk to thinks about that for the rest of your life. They don't. What you do control is everything going forward. And if you miss that reality, you don't have the opportunity to get it right going forward. It takes a lot of energy to hate people as much as it does to love. So there's no point in it. You just kind of got to let it go and move. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think it was, in my case, and everybody will have a different one. In my case, it was a reminder to character. I'd had a lot of people try to teach me character before. So, I mean, I should have had it, but that was a forcing function for me to think about my character. Because once you lose the uniform, once you lose the support structure around you that is who you, I couldn't even say I was a soldier anymore. That was my identity. Then you've got to figure out what your identity is and how you're going to reflect that. So I think for me, that's the biggest one. And I'll be honest enough, I think there are a lot of things going on in our country right now. They're putting a lot of people's character, maybe not that publicly, under pressure. And people who never expected to wrestle with character challenges, really difficult decisions, suddenly get to a point where they've got to make decisions that aren't like go left or go right on the battlefield. They're much more difficult than that. And those are the ones that I think we need to try to help each other with. Sorry.
So Megan, one more question. So we have time for one more.
Nobody wants to ask the last one because it's got to be really good. So,
Shoot,
all right.
that's a lot of pressure, sir. You mentioned that sometimes you fail kind of in your approach to yourself, right? Your morals.
Not
so like,
sometimes.
yeah. So can we
Daily.
talk a little bit about that? Because it's great to say
Yeah.
character is this thing that you're
Right.
striving for, but what happens when you trip?
Yeah, the reality is, or at least in my case, and I think it's pretty common, character is an average. And so every day I get up and I don't, stand and look in the mirror and say, you're going to be a better man today. But I still think that I'm going to be a good person. And every single day I have one or more interactions with people where I don't respond like I should have. I act like a jerk. I do something, etc. every day. Now, they're not monumental. I'm not, stealing money out the back of my company or something like that, but they're still reflections of shortcomings in character that aren't worthy of the person that I want to be. And the key thing is not letting that be the new norm. The key is to go home that night and feel bad about it so that you sort of say, okay, I didn't get that right, but I will try to make up for it tomorrow. And the thing about getting older or in a position of responsibility is there are fewer people around us telling us what not to do. When Mark was the chairman, almost nobody gets up in the morning and says, Chairman, don't do that. If he says, we'll do this, they'll go, okay, they'll try to do it. So, yeah. You have to become your own person that does that. And when you're a senior officer particularly, but a senior officer in a bank or anywhere, you may have 200 interactions a day with young people in the company, many of whom will only meet you once in their whole life. I met a lot of soldiers on the battlefield, would never meet a 4-star general before, never meet one after. I'm the only one, so I represent all 4-star generals. And if whatever our interaction is, they're going to write home that night and tell their spouse about it. And they're going to say, I met General McChrystal and ... And if I get it wrong, that ... is going to spread and just give an impression to people. If I get it right, even if it's me doing a little bit of being better than I really am, then you get a different outcome. And so that's the thing about character. It's just, you can't let it down. It doesn't mean you can't have fun. You can have that last beer, whatever you want to do. But you've got to always be thinking about it. That's the thing you don't want to let go of. Great question. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're going to turn it over to Megan now, and then Mr. Jim Rosner.
Perfect.
I want to extend my deepest gratitude to General McChrystal and Major General Boyd for sharing your time, perspective, and experiences with us. General McChrystal, the insight you offered, especially around the themes of character, leadership, and service, are truly inspiring and resonate deeply with our community. Your candor and wisdom have given us much to reflect on, both as professionals and individuals. Thank you both again, and to General Milley, to Mark, to all of our veterans and military spouses and military connected in the room and online for your extraordinary service and for your continued commitment to supporting veterans and military families. Let's give them another round of applause. For those of you whom I have not yet met, my name is Megan Murray, and I lead external programming and advocacy for JPMorgan Chase's Office of Military and Veterans Affairs. I have the honor of engaging and leading partnerships like this incredible one with the American Battle Monuments Foundation to help our military community connect and thrive both inside and outside the firm. I'm also a proud spouse of an Army combat veteran and the granddaughter of a retired Navy and Marine Corps veteran, which I always have to mention out the trifecta there. It's truly an honor to celebrate with all of you for JPMorgan's Military and Veterans Appreciation Month. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce Jim Rosner, who will continue our program. Jim serves as the chairman of the board of American Battle Monuments Foundation. ABMF is dear to his heart, as his grandfathers on both sides of his family served in World War II. Jim has been tireless in his support for ABMF. His leadership has garnered more than $3.8 million in donations, as well as an impressive footprint of visibility among individuals and companies who care about our active duty military, veterans, fallen heroes, and their families. Additionally, Jim is a senior partner at the law firm of Troutman, Pepper & Locke. His practice is focused on domestic and international transactions and corporate finance. He advises private equity funds and corporations pursuing growth throughout the United States and throughout the world, including Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Jim is also the founder and president of European American Chamber of Commerce with chapters in New York City and Paris. Early this year, Jim was presented with the Legion of Honor, the highest order of merit in France, in recognition for his many decades of extraordinary service to Franco-American relations. Jim, it's a pleasure to welcome you up to close today's program.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you for those kind words. We're grateful for JPMorgan and Mark and your team, Megan, Nina. Thank you for your support, and JPMorgan really being one of our key corporate partners who really demonstrate what our motto is we remember now, then, and forever. And as you know, 1% of Americans serve in the military, yet during World War II, 12% served in the military, and about the same number in World War I. It shows to me that when the world needs America, America's there. And I'm very proud to work to remember the service and sacrifice of so many who came before. In a couple months, we'll celebrate the semi-sesquicentennial of our nation, and we stand on the shoulders who fought and died in what we hope to be the only world wars. Let us remember those marble monuments and green grass of the 26 foreign cemeteries maintained by our partners at the American Battle Monuments Commission are not a legacy of the past, but an enduring reminder of the price of freedom and the commitment of the United States and our allies to promote peace and stability in the world. Today's Scholar Series conversation is just one of the ABMF programs that the ABMF offers to amplify the stories of those who served, especially the men and women who are buried and memorialized at those hallowed sites. Our donors and corporate partners support commemorative events such as this one and those around the world, including at our cemeteries, as well as other programs for education and outreach, especially to young children. The video of today's conversation with General McChrystal will be hosted on our website abmf.com, and I invite you to visit our site to listen to this and other scholars and ambassador series that are online at our site. General McChrystal, thank you for this salute to service. In the question of character in my profession, there's a lot of smart people who come into a law firm and everybody knows more than everybody else. Most people know more than me, but I had a simple standard for choosing people to work on my team. And I didn't serve in the military, but I knew that if I picked somebody who I want to be in a foxhole with, that would be the person that I did. And I've done that for the last 40 years and it works. So thank you. And as a role model, leader who lives integrity regardless, we have a small token for you. And thank you again, and I'll turn it back over to you, Megan.
Thank you, Jim, to Frank, and to our partners at the American Battle Monuments Foundation. And thank you all for joining us today for this special fireside chat. Now, a very exciting addition to today's program. We are thrilled to host General McChrystal for a book signing, which is going to be right outside these doors. So please join us. We're going to have some refreshments. Stick around. General McChrystal has generously offered his time, and we'll do some custom signatures for you all. So thank you for being here. Before I release everyone, if I could have the MBA and ABMF team come up with our speakers, we'd like to take a quick photo, or it didn't happen. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it, and happy Salute to Service Month.